Hey guys, in today's video, we're going to do something a little bit different, not scripted, more raw, and basically what I'm going to do is just go through Manchester and show you how the city's laid out and what are the parts that you might want to consider living in and some of the areas that aren't so nice. So what I'll do is first start off, you've got Manchester here, and you've got the different sections of Manchester. So you've got the north end, the east end, the south end, and then the west end or the west side, generally referred to. Now what I'm going to do is we'll start off in downtown Manchester where you have Elm Street, which is the main business district. A lot of the main employers are over here, and you have more of those unique restaurants along Elm Street. So we'll zoom in right here. Got Elm Street, and it's not a super long road. I mean, it does eventually end in North Manchester, and then it works its way down into, I wouldn't consider it South Manchester, but it does eventually end right over here on South Elm Street. And we'll zoom in afterwards and show you where that is. But what I want to do is start off by showing you where, the inner city portion of Manchester eventually transitions into the north end of Manchester. So you have Webster Street, which runs right here, and it does intersect with Elm Street right at that point. Now, you'll see Livingston Park. That's something I'll point out right now. Very nice area. Let me go in a little bit more. So you got Hooksett Road, and there's a set of lights here off of Webster, and that basically works its way right into Hooksett, as the name implies. And that's a nice area to live around. Right over here, there's a lot of housing developments, and this is, it's not quite, deep into the north end of Manchester, but I would still consider it the north end. You've got Union Street, which that's one of the main routes, and a lot of nice developments off of that street up here. So if I zoom in, right in this region, a lot of $1 million plus homes. Very, very nice, highly desirable. The north end it's older, there's more mature landscaping, and because there's not as much space to build, it just makes the property values a bit higher. And it's great if you want close proximity to downtown, but you want an area that is a little bit more private and maybe not as much foot traffic. The north end might be a good spot. Now, we're going to take a look at Webster once again. Now, if we continue on Webster and we did not take Hooksett Road there, as I mentioned, pan out just a little bit so we're not too close. Now, Webster eventually meets up with Smith Road, which runs right along, basically goes all the way up to Mammoth Road here, and then it works its way back down towards the inner city portion of Manchester. But what we're going to do is take a look over on this end. We got the VA hospital right in this section, right off of Smith Road. And then as we get over to Mammoth Road, that's one of the main routes. I mean, it goes all the way up into South Hooksett here, and then it also goes all the way down. Right there, South Mammoth Road. And if we panned out, you'd see that goes basically all the way down and towards Londonderry. And that's getting a little bit further south, and we'll touch on that a little bit later in the video. But I don't want to get too far ahead. So we're going to go right back up here where we just left off. So Smith Road intersects with Mammoth Road. Now, anything closer to Mammoth Road is a nice area to live, especially as you get further east of Mammoth Road. And then just along the west side of Mammoth Road, also a nice spot. It's when you start getting towards these inner city streets that it's not as nice. And anything up here too, as you get closer to Hooksett, but, north of Webster, all nice. North of Webster, you're really in the north end of Manchester. You really can't go wrong in this area. It's right over in this region, though. So you've got Bridge Street, which is one of the main routes here. And we're going to touch on that a bit further in just a second. But between Bridge Street and Webster Street, this is probably your better option if you want it to be close to downtown. A lot of this area it'll be traditional single-family homes, but also a mix of older multifamilies. So you'll have a mix of renters and homeowners here. So it's not a bad area. It's just not as desirable as really the heart of the north end once you get past Webster. And then same thing holds true. This is probably the nicest area if you wanted to live very close to Elm. So if you wanted to live right by Elm Street, living in this section here, like Sagamore Street, Prospect Street, Orange Street, this is all a fairly decent area. But the closer you get to Mammoth Road over here, the better it's going to be. And that, I'll touch on it while we're in this section, but you've got McIntyre ski area. It's basically a hill, but it's one of those things that's in the city. It's very close, so it's convenient. And it's a nice, small, you could call it a mountain, but they have tubing. That's probably one of their biggest money makers is the actual tubing, but they usually have night skiing and night tubing. It's a great spot to just go out during the winter time and hang out. And you could probably even go there in the summer and hike, but it's really nothing, that challenging. You'd most likely go further up north towards the mountains to do that. But it's just something to note, being right there. It's very, very convenient. So we're going to pan back out. And before we take a look at Bridge Street as far as where it goes, we'll keep touching on downtown Manchester here. And now this is when we really start getting into the heart of downtown. And you'll see right here, where's Central High School? There we go. So Central High School right here, basically in the heart of downtown. These streets surrounding it, not the greatest area. You probably wouldn't want to live down here, especially as you get further over. Hanover is a good street, but it's the more central portion of it in downtown that you'd probably want to avoid. You got Lake Ave, Spruce Street, Valley Street. These are all areas you would probably want to avoid if you were west of Mammoth Road. But it's not necessarily bad as you get further up here. So Mammoth Road, I want to just get it right, the right view here. Right here, Mammoth Road, all these streets eventually connect up here, or eventually they connect to a street that connects to Mammoth Road. You see Lake Ave running back up. Up here is not bad. So this is all right by Elliott Hospital, and this is the other main hospital in Manchester along with Catholic Medical Center. Not a bad area whatsoever. I know I mentioned that you'd want to be east of Mammoth Road, but if you were in this area, you'd probably be pretty happy as well. And as you get further down here, Scilly Road, that's another main route. You've got some of these main routes like Scilly Road, Valley Street, Spruce Street, Lake Ave, Hanover Street, Bridge Street. These are all generally ways someone would get to downtown Manchester from Mammoth Road. And as you get further south, you start getting into a pretty nice area. Because you're getting into the south end of Manchester, closer to areas like Lichfield, Londonderry. And that, for the most part, you can't go wrong in most of those. But I'll touch on that. We'll zoom in over there once we get further down. But just going back to this point, you would probably want to avoid this area. Stay closer to Mammoth Road if you want to be in this downtown region. But really, I don't see a huge appeal to living very close to Elm Street, even if you work there, because the city's not that big. You could live way on the outskirts. You could live in Auburn, and you're still only maybe 15, 20 minutes from downtown. So just to touch on it in case you were considering it, it's generally going to be somebody that's renting, because a lot of the high-rise buildings along Elm Street or the mill buildings along the Merrimack River, both on the east and west side of it, they're appealing to a younger demographic. Just because of the style, you're closer to the bars, restaurants here along Elm Street. But that's my opinion. Other people might have a different view on it. But as someone who's lived in the city my entire life, I probably wouldn't live close to downtown because the proximity is so easy. So let's go over here, and I want to touch on Bridge Street because I mentioned that before. But now Bridge Street, you've got West Bridge Street once you go. So if I zoomed in here, you've got Elm Street here. There's a set of lights. West Bridge Street, you'd go across right here. You'd be going across the Notre Dame Bridge into the west side. But we're gonna make our way east. So as you get on Bridge Street and you work your way all the way up, it keeps on going. Eventually it's gonna intersect with Mammoth Road right here. So there's a set of lights here. Got Mammoth Road running right through it. But then Bridge Street becomes Wellington Road. In my opinion, this is one of the best spots you could live as far as proximity to downtown. As you continue up Wellington Road, a lot of nice developments up here. There's also some apartment buildings, townhouses, condos, things like that. A lot of new construction. Right over here, there's big developments in this region as well as up here. A lot of apartment buildings. And one of the biggest appeals is the highway access, because you have very, very easy access to 93 South and North right here. Now, this on-ramp was under construction for a period of time. I don't know if it still is, But what you'd have to do if you lived in this area and you couldn't get on right here, you would take Wellington Road in this direction all the way down. I'll show you here the Londonderry Turnpike right there. And there's a couple gas stations, set of lights there. You would take a right-hand turn, and then you've got 101 right there. That gives you direct access right here. You'd have an on-ramp here. You also have an on-ramp over here, and then 2 off-ramps there. So basically, you'd get on here on 101, and then eventually you'd have access. You'd be able to split off to 93 North or 93 South here if you're heading down towards Boston. And that basically would make up for the fact that you couldn't get on right here. But you could also get off here too. So I don't think that was affected. But you also have an on-ramp to 93 North right here. So the 93 South on-ramp is here. 93 North is here. But I don't think that construction is going to be very long-term. So even if you lived in this area, you shouldn't have to worry about it, down the road. So as you get over here on Wellington Road, I don't want to get too far out as far as going into the other towns surrounding Manchester, but I'm going to touch on it because I really like this area. As I mentioned before, you've got Bypass 28, Londonderry Turnpike right here, and this is the Massabesic traffic circle. It's a well-known spot in the city, and this is the front of the lake. So you've got Massabesic Lake, which is the water supply for Manchester, and it's a very, very nice lake. Even though you can't swim in it, you can have small boats, but it's pretty rocky. I believe you can do kayaks and things like that, but you just can't touch the water. Now, the big appeal to this is that there's tons of walking and biking trails surrounding the lake. I actually have another video on the channel where I didn't cover the entire lake because it goes all the way out into Auburn over here. But in that video, I basically did go along the front here. I worked my way on some of these trails right here. And then I think we ended up over in this region here at some point in the video. And the issue with the lakes in this section, now you've got lakes up north here into the lakes region, but I'm not going to touch on that. But I will pan out real quickly just to show you. Further up north here, when you get into the lakes region, where you have Lake Winnipesaukee, you have you have Sunapee, Lake Sunapee right there, and then you have Bristol, which is, where are we here? Right in this section. So you have Newfound Lake, which is up here closer to Winnipesaukee. Those are like the 3 big lakes up there. But as far as lakes go down here, Massabesic Lake, very popular. Small one right here. And we'll touch on this area a little bit, but Crystal Lake, they did allow swimming and they still do. But this lake's become very dirty over the years, and I think this has been an ongoing thing. But that's what can happen when you let people swim in the lakes in this area, because there's so much foot traffic, easy accessibility. It's more ideal to have something like this where it is a water supply, so the lake just remains very, very nice. Now, let's pan back in here. Going back up. Now, we were at this point here, showed you the traffic circle, Wellington Road. You also have Candia Road, which is right over here, and it does split off. You can see Wellington's up there. Candia's over here. Candia brings you to a similar portion of the city. We're over here on the east side of Manchester. All of this, really nice. Now, I've shot some videos here in the past when I did those winter storms, and I don't know anybody who's from the area, they've been able to point it out, but Lakeshore Road right here, really, this is one of the most private roads on the east side here, and you would never know you're in Manchester, but it's just beautiful. Trees all along, a lot of privacy, and it provides access to these trails. It's really nice because you have some views right here on Lakeshore Road. It opens up and you get a view of the water. Now, there's not a ton of real estate for sale though. That's the only problem because it's fairly maxed out as far as land goes. But same thing. Over here by Candia, anything over here, really nice. There's no bad spots to live in this area. And also great highway access because this eventually, as you come in here, Candia Road, you come right through here, East Industrial Park Drive, and then you've got some apartment complexes, some nice high-end ones right over here, basically behind the Dunkins, right across from Wendy's. And then you do have access to... Now, the problem with this spot is that you have access... Right here, let me zoom in so you can see. Access to 101, but you don't have access to 93 North right here. It's a weird on-ramp, but you can't get over to 93 North. So in order to do that, you would have to make your way back up over here to this area. So over towards Wellington Road. That's the only downside. It does offer easy access. So Candia Road, you can get right on to 93 South. So if you're heading towards Boston, not a problem. There's an off-ramp, on-ramp right here. But it's just getting 93 North is the issue. I don't know why it's like that, but that's just the way it is. And then as you work your way back over here, Candia Road eventually intersects with Mammoth Road, which we had touched on before. Same thing, all these developments in here, very, very popular. They're just kind of in the heart of the city, but, they're not in the less desirable spots in the inner city is what I'd call it. Same thing over here, a lot of developments. You've got, Hanover Street, which is in this area. Hanover Street, same thing. There's so many streets that I'm not going to be able to specifically zone in on every single one, but Hanover runs over here, and there's a lot of businesses. Hannaford's over here. You've got a lot of, it's like a strip mall in this section right over here. Same thing, it runs all the way over and then eventually intersects with Candia Road. And Hanover Street does run all the way down towards Elm Street, but this is the area where as you get closer to Elm, it's not as desirable. But when you get further up past Mammoth Road, great spot. So you can see as I zoomed out, Candia, Hanover, Wellington Road, as they're all making their way over here towards Auburn. Now that's the region that is very, very nice. All right, so let's get back in here. I'm going to take a look at South Mammoth Road. And now we've touched on Mammoth up here as we were going into Hooksett. But Mammoth also runs south. So if we want to run south down towards Londonderry, I want to zoom out a little bit. This is where you're starting to get into another nice area of Manchester, getting closer to Crystal Lake, as I touched on before. You've got more schools. I'm not going to touch on all of them, but Central High School was in the downtown. These are the three main public schools, public high schools. Memorial High School is, I'm going to have to zoom in a little bit to register. Manchester Memorial High School right here. Basically it's kind of like you can see here, it's kind of like the south, but more like southeast section of Manchester, whereas Central High School was right in downtown Manchester. I have to zoom in quite a bit to get it to register right here. And then the west side of Manchester, we'll touch on it when we get over there, but West High School is over there. And those are the main ones. So going to make our way back down, take a look at South Mammoth Road. So as we come down here, South Mammoth, it eventually works its way out here I'll pan out again to Mammoth Road, and then you get into Londonderry. I don't want to go that far, but once again, anything in this region as you get further down, very nice areas. Over here, great, especially over there by Crystal Lake, even though it's not the nicest lake. Tons of developments down here. See if I can zoom in a little bit to show you where we are. So I actually shot on one of the driving tours. I went up here. This is Rosegate Farms Drive. There was a listing for sale a little while back, and it had fairly good views. It's set a little bit higher up down here, but all this, as you get further out, you see Bodwell Road right off of Mammoth. That connects to a lot of popular developments. All these developments here, they're going to be going to Manchester Memorial High School. And it works its way out here, and then you'll see, where are we here? So let me get over, and then you got Bodwell, which goes right under the highway there, and then Bodwell comes all the way down here, and then you get out to eventually Old Derry Road, and then you get into Derry. But this whole section here, very, very nice. No, I would say no bad spots to live. There's a mix. I mean, you're going to have older homes, but also developments where they're going to be really new houses, very, very nice. And you could be getting up there in price. I mean, easily over $600,000 for some of these developments, not a problem. And then you'll see right here, obviously, Manchester-Boston Regional Airport, which is very, very convenient, even though it doesn't have as many flights as Boston-Logan. And Boston-Logan, I'm not going to pan out, but it basically, you take 93 South all the way down from Manchester, about 50 minutes, 60 minutes, depending on traffic. If it's heavy traffic, could be much more than that. Nice thing with that is that they do have the bus lines. You'd have the Boston Express, and I'll show you real quick. So Boston Express, there's a couple stops. The two, I guess, more popular, you'd have one in Londonderry, one in Salem down here, and they take you all the way down to the airport. They can bring you to Boston South Station, Boston Logan, and from Manchester, if you took that bus, you'd actually go to the station in Londonderry. You can park your car there. That's the great part, and it doesn't cost anything. There's a short-term and a long-term lot. Get on the bus, $19 one way, then obviously $19 the other way too. But it's direct, and they only usually, so the Londonderry one, you'd get on, they'd stop once in Salem, they'd stop at South Station, and then they'd go to Logan, and they drop you off right at your terminal, no matter what airline you're flying with. And you can't beat it. I mean, with what the rates are for parking, it's a no-brainer, and it takes usually about an hour and 30 minutes because of the stop. Now, going back in here to Manchester Boston Regional Airport, the south section of the airport's technically in Londonderry, and if I can pan in to show you, it's really down in this section here. There's a nice walking trail out here. There's so many walking trails they've come up with now, the rail trails throughout the city. But anything down here, very, very nice. Once again, as long as you don't mind a little bit of air traffic, you're going to have some noise. It's not to the same degree as Boston, but they have a steady amount of flights throughout the day. They have 2 runways. You see this one here and this one over here. And they do vary depending on which one they're going to use, depending on the wind. But for the most part, you will get some plane noise all in this region. And even up here, you'll hear it too, because they're going to be flying overhead as they're taking off in different directions. But usually not a huge concern. It's a nice area to live. So let's pan back in here, go up, and kind of try to put this all together so you can see where we are. So up here, once again, let's go up a little further. Okay, so going back, this was the downtown section. And if we hadn't already touched on it, these were all the ones that I had mentioned. Over here, you got the Spruce Street, Valley Street. Let's pan in a little bit more. And then we had Scilly Road here. All this section, not the greatest area, especially closer to Elm Street. Nicer as you get up towards Mammoth Road here, South Mammoth Road. All that really, really nice. Now, over here, as we come in, you're going to see that Elm Street eventually comes down. It becomes South Elm, but then it eventually just ends right over here. There's some developments for apartment complexes here. They're not the nicest area. And then you have Queen City Ave, which brings you across the bridge here, across the Merrimack to the west side of Manchester. But if we stayed on it and went right, or we went towards the east side, over here you have Willow Street up there, which runs towards the inner city. But then South Willow, which is this whole strip right here. And you'll see South Willow is this right here as I'm following it all the way down. That's the other main retail district in Manchester. This is more like chain restaurants, car dealerships, the Mall of New Hampshire's over here. You'll see right over in this section. And that, it's nice to be close to, but the thing is you could really live anywhere in the city and you're still close. And that runs all the way down. I mean, there are plenty of developments right on the outskirts on both sides. So if you wanted to be very close to it, it's absolutely possible. But once again, really not any bad areas to live as you get further south here. And then South Willow eventually connects all the way down, and it basically goes down towards the airport. I'm trying to show you here. See right over here, you're basically getting down in this section. And like we just touched on, nice area over there. No problem living in that section. Very easy access to the highway. It's better. It's actually probably a better location if you're working in Massachusetts or in Boston, because you're even closer. The further south you can get, the better, without going further south into towns like Salem. Salem would be ideal. Salem, Windham, Pelham, those are all going to be really close to the border, which would be ideal if you're working in Massachusetts. But this is where you'll see right off of the main strip here on South Willow, you have the Supercenter, Walmart, everything. I mean, you have Chunky's over here. There's a lot of businesses in this region right here. So if you live close, you're only a few minutes from a lot of those. Right off of here, so as we went right back up and we took Queen City Ave, and I showed you Willow, South Willow, you have South Beach here, but then Beach Street does run towards the inner city, but this is a one-way street. But I will touch on South Beach. It basically runs right down here, and you'll see to the left of it, Califf Road, which is also not direct. There's no direct access right from Queen City, but you would take South Elm and then you'd cut over on Baker Street here and get on the Califf Road. But all these streets in between, or basically in between South Beach and Califf Road, those are all nice areas, pretty popular. The nice part about this is that Califf Road eventually connects or becomes Brown Ave, and then you see South Beach eventually intersects Brown Ave right before the access to the highway here. And basically it continues going down. It's kind of a mix here. You have some commercial business right along the river, as well as some other type of retailers like gas stations and fast food restaurants, airport diner, hotel over here. But as we get further down along here, Brown Ave, very nice area as you start getting further down. A lot of nice developments in here. Not so much on this side, it's more so over here. As you get further towards Litchfield, yes, plenty of nice developments. And then you get out towards the airport here. Airport Road, you're really starting to get into, the outskirts of Manchester at this point. You're getting closer to Litchfield. If I pan out, you'll see it does show Litchfield being further out, but if we actually saw the boundaries of Litchfield, it does go up into like kind of this region here. And then same thing with Londonderry, because the south portion of the airport is actually in Londonderry. So once again, nice area down here. I really don't see any negatives to living in this section of Manchester. So let's touch on the west side now, since we really haven't covered that yet. So far we really have covered the north end as you get up into Hooksett, very nice. East end here about by Massabesic Lake into Auburn, beautiful area. South end over by the airport, once again, very, very nice. And really the only spot we wanted to avoid was, and as you can hear probably in the background right now, this is a raw video, so we can hear a plane in the background. I live probably about 10, 15 minutes from Manchester Boston Regional Airport, so that's a smaller plane. Therefore the noise isn't too bad, but throughout the day you will get that. It's not bad. I mean, if you're living next to a military base, it's much more intrusive. So let's see here. Let's make our way so you can kind of see where we're at. Now, there's a few ways to get over to the west side of Manchester. You've got, let's go up here so we can take a look. I want to zoom in so you can see. So you've got Amoskeag Street right here, which is kind of getting into the north end of Manchester. Not quite, because Webster Street is right here. But that's one way to get over. And then if you take Amoskeag Street, eventually you could make your way onto Goffstown Road, which brings you out to Goffstown. Very nice area. Even though this is technically the west side of Manchester, if you were going to pick anywhere in Manchester, the actual Goffstown line I don't think is too far past this area, so you're getting close to Goffstown at this point. We're not really in the heart of the west side. And then Front Street makes your way out towards, it can bring you to two spots. You can go out towards Dunbarton, but you can also go out towards Hooksett as well. So you can already see Dunbarton Road. And what I wanted to touch on was, as you're on Front Street, and it basically runs along the Merrimack River here, Manchester Community College is up here. And then you keep working your way up. You get Intervale Country Club. It's a golf course, 9-hole. I believe it's a 9-hole course. And then over here, Country Club Drive. These are all large apartment developments right off of Front Street. They're nice if you want it to be relatively close to downtown, but you didn't necessarily want to be right in the heart of the city. And then out here, Hackett Hill Road. A lot of new developments as you get further out. But like you can see as I pan out, this is starting to bring you out towards Dunbarton and out towards Bow. And Bow is a very nice area. Bow, great school districts. You're basically on the south outskirts of Concord. And then Hooksett, as you can see right up above. But I won't go too much further out. You can see Front Street eventually, because you have the Country Club here. Brings you out towards Bass Pro Shop, Walmart, Market Basket in Hooksett. Nice area out there. Really no bad spots. So coming back in here, we took Amoskeag Street, sometimes I have trouble pronouncing it, right here, across into the west side. And you've got Eddy Road, which runs along the river, and this is in the west side at this point. All of these developments right in here, this is probably a nicer part of the west side, but as you get closer to Catholic Medical Center, which is right here, which you can access very easily by taking the Notre Dame Bridge, which is right off of, or basically you're taking West Bridge Street, right here across. There's a set of lights over here, and then Catholic Medical Center is right over to the left. And then right here, once again, you have all the old mill buildings lining the river, just as you did on the east side here. And there's a lot of businesses. There's also places, the lofts, those are the ones you can rent. So there is living options over here. I don't know. I mean, I guess it appeals to some people, especially if you're working at the hospital. But like I've mentioned a couple times, the city is not that big. So you could live further out, and it's not going to be a long drive to get here. So let's take a look here. Another one too, just so I can touch on a couple of these main routes. You've got Granite Street. See, it's running right here. That's another way to get from the east side of the river into the west side of Manchester. And then down here, I'll touch on it too. You've got Queen City Ave, which we touched on briefly over here, and we'll do it again in just a second, but Queen City Ave also is another way. And you've got Elliott. You've got a big urgent care facility right over in this section here, right by the river. Now, this is a section I'd probably say you'd want to avoid. All of that right in the heart of the west side, right around Catholic Medical Center. And then as you get further out towards Pinardville, nicer area, this market basket is actually in Bedford. So over here, anything past 114 right here, you're getting into a nice spot. St. Anselm's College, nice area once again. I mean, if you lived close to that, you'd probably find it to be a pretty nice area. But it's when you get back into this heart of the west side. That's really the spot that generally is less desirable. But, I mean, it's something you want to look into. I mean, look at the crime statistics and all that data, and just can kind of compare zip codes and see if it, compared to where you're coming from, it might not be that bad. But when you compare it to other spots in New Hampshire, it generally ranks a little bit higher. Now, Boynton Street, right here, as you get on Boynton further out towards Bedford, nice area. This section right over here, very, very nice. You've also got 2nd Street, which you could see runs from the west side. We're still on the west side here because we're on the west side of the river. And 2nd Street is just full of a bunch of like chain restaurants, Taco Bell, McDonald's, all of that stuff. And Boynton eventually does, along with 2nd Street, and I'll zoom in a second here, 2nd eventually becomes South River Road, and then this gets into Bedford. And out here is where you have your Whole Foods, Trader Joe's. They're building quite a bit out here. And, there's Bedford, there's really nothing bad you can say about it. It's a very expensive area along with Wyndham. It's a more of an upscale market and very desirable to live. But we're focusing on Manchester here. So Boynton Street was the other one. Boynton Street comes from the west side, starts running out towards Bedford. Nice area. This is an intersection right here. You've got 101 set of lights here. It's 101, 114 in Boynton Street. And Boynton Street, as you cross right here, it gets on to 101 West. And that brings you out into the heart of Bedford. The heart of Bedford being over here. Although this section over here is still technically in Bedford too. So I'm not going to go too far out in this direction. But once you get out here towards Bedford, you're no longer in the west side of Manchester. And it's a very nice area. And the same holds true over here too. You could see as I pan back out, Goffstown, you had Goffstown Road out there. Dunbarton was up there. New Boston, very nice area. Ware, these are all a little bit more rural, but you're still relatively close to the city. You'll find some nice property with some privacy. Mount Vernon, get into Amherst, nice area. Milford, Merrimack, all those great areas. Litchfield. Basically, there's so many towns in the outskirts of the city that are great if you didn't want to be specifically in Manchester. Now, I'm going to touch on one more area I kind of thought of that I don't think I looked at earlier. Now, let's get back in here so we can, I don't want to get you lost where we are. So, Elm Street, we're going to go back over here to the east side of the river, and then we're going to zoom in. So, you've got Elm Street right there. Canal Street, it basically runs along the base of Elm Street, closer to the river. And then as you come back in, or you pan back in a little bit closer, got Commercial Street right here. So Commercial Street runs parallel to Canal Street. You also see Bedford Street in there too. But this is an area that has a lot of living options. You'll have some that are like detached, like condo style. Then you have the mill buildings down here. And then you have a mix of all these different major employers, WMUR, the news stations down here, SNHU campus over here. You've also got UNH Manchester in this area right here. There's also UNH in Durham as well. And this is a spot where it's pretty desirable for that higher income earner that wants to live close to downtown, but maybe they're not interested in the north end of Manchester because it's more so single family homes. And then they don't want to live over here because it's all multifamily property for the most part. And they're starting to build some higher rise stuff right off of Elm Street. But this is that section you would probably be in down here if you wanted to live in the mill buildings or in some of these other developments that are down here, sort of off of Canal and, Commercial Street down there, which Commercial Street is more so the businesses. Canal Street allows you some living opportunities right here between Elm and Canal Street. So I think that will basically wrap up this tour here. I'm just going to take a look here, make sure we'll pan out. I didn't miss anything, but I mean, really just to kind of summarize here and kind of pan out just a little bit more. For the most part, Manchester, there's so many options for you to live, and it's the largest city, the most populated city in the state. And it's kind of surprising for people that might come here from other cities. You think, wow, I mean, this city is not that big, and it really isn't. I mean, but for New Hampshire standards, it's fairly large. There's quite a bit of commerce here, a lot of major employers. Although you will have much more high-paying jobs when you get into Massachusetts, it's nice. It's just a good spot to live because you're in the heart of southern New Hampshire. You've got Concord here, which is really the cutoff. And then south of that is the heart of southern New Hampshire right here. Close proximity to the coast, Hampton, Northampton, Portsmouth, all these areas. You got closer proximity to Massachusetts down here. And then if you want to make your way up into the Lakes region and then up further north into the White Mountains, you're looking at maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on where you're going. But yeah, for the most part, nice area. And hopefully this helps to kind of break down the city a little bit more and give you a better understanding of where the nicer parts live and some of the parts you might want to avoid. Other than that, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video and I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one.